Thanks so much for finding some time to have a chat with me. We sort of spoke before I hit the record button on this, and I was explaining really my embarrassment around not having a really solid understanding, I guess, of all the good work FIA and yourself are doing around submissions and advocacy. And I thought, well, I need to jump on a phone call with Blake because I'm not comfortable with the limited amount of information I know about it, and I want to know a little bit more. And I thought actually that there may be some benefit, given that we're so comfortable now with talking over Zoom with each other, that I could just hit the record button and share this publicly. And if anyone else in the fundraising industry, or perhaps even generally, might also get some benefit from it, then that might be a good thing. And if at the end of the day, mate, no one tunes in and it's just us, well, I've met my selfish need of learning hopefully a little bit more. So thanks for being brave enough, Blake, if we do publish this to...
Okay. Happy to be the test monkey.
Very cool. So Blake, your title at FIA is the Executive Manager of Regulatory Affairs and Policy. You've been there for 7 months, I believe, from your LinkedIn profile. And I actually noticed when I was doing a bit of the stalking online that you've got quite a diverse, rich working background. How is it that you explain what you do when you meet someone at a barbie or something?
Look, I think that's an interesting question to ask in the first instance, because for background, I grew up in New South Wales on a large property, and having conversations with farmers in the local area where I grew up and trying to explain to them what I do at a barbecue is always an interesting discussion. When they ask me and they say, "What do you do?" I say, "Well, I work in public policy." And they go, "Oh, what's that?" And I said, "Well, I basically walk the halls of Parliament and make change for the fundraising sector." And they look at me, they take a step back and they go, "Oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that." And that's probably the best way to explain it. But I think to kind of add that extra element to it is what I also say is legislation and policy affects everyone, from the newborn baby to the 99-year-old sitting in an aged care home, and I basically look at all the legislation and the rules and the regulations and basically explain them in plain English to the everyday Australian to make them have a better understanding of public policy, and how they can navigate public policy and legislation to be able to do their jobs better, but also to be able to, apply for, government grants and, to reap the benefits of initiatives, legislation that's being passed through Parliament that makes the lives of Australians better. It is essentially the job that I do, is making sure that I can aid for the sector, but also making sure that I bring a fresh perspective in that skill in sharing what's actually in the legislation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it does. And I guess what was it that drew you to FIA? What was the interest there for you to go into that sort of work?
So previously, obviously having worked in different areas from foreign affairs to trade and the like, and environment and education and agriculture and all those things, my career has been centered around public policy, and basically the last remaining piece of the pie to be like that diverse circular person is really that social services sector. And when the opportunity came up to work at FIA, I grabbed the opportunity with two horns and thought, let's give this a crack. And it's been 7 months that I've been here now, and it has been an uphill learning curve because it's a whole new sector. But I feel like I'm finally getting to the point where I understand the legislation, I understand how things work, to an extent. And this just seemed like a new challenge, which would just give me the perfect all-rounder in public policy, which is what I've always wanted to achieve.
Brilliant. And I think this year alone, it seems that FIA have sort of contributed a few submissions already. I checked the website just again today, and another one had gone up there. So it looks in 2020 that there's 3 there. But what's the FIA's role here when it comes to submissions? Is it a proactive one where you're sort of listening to your member base around what those issues are and then proactively going out to the relevant policymakers, or is it a reactive sort of approach where you're sort of waiting for submissions or waiting for the public consultation stages, or is it a bit of both?
So there's 2 answers to your question there. The first one is, obviously FIA does listen to all of its members. And because the FIA membership is built of a broad church, we've got members who work in animal welfare, and we've got the religious groups that sit within FIA, and children welfare, and the international development charities, and all that kind of stuff. The consultation with members is so important and pivotal to my role to be able to advocate to government on specific areas. And at the moment, because the main feature of the current government is in reducing red tape for the sector, a lot of our submissions are focused around that area at the moment, in making sure that we cut red tape for the sector so that charities can, they don't have to spend so much time working through compliance measures and spending millions of dollars, which actually could be put forward into, programs or campaigns or things like that can, boost a charity, but also create effective community engagement. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess it seems to be a bit of a balance we need to strike, doesn't it, in terms of having charities operate in a way that is conducive to public trust and reporting requirements around that, so that we are able to operate in an environment where we are trusted, and there is a compliance sort of factor around how money is put to use. But then it can go too far, and it sounds to me like perhaps it has in terms of, well, the scale's now tipped the other way, where money raised or money generated isn't able to go to beneficiaries or to their intended purposes, because we are caught in this wheel of compliance and red tape and duplication of effort, and a lack of consistency, particularly as we start to jump borders, which seems to me, after having read through sort of the 3 submissions just from this year alone, seems to be a common factor, right, in terms of this jurisdiction. I keep hearing this notion of harmonization. Can you maybe if we look at that 2021 pre-budget submission, which was addressed to the Assistant Treasurer, maybe as a platform for us to dive into some of these issues. There were 5 key recommendations there, and one of those was centered around this notion of harmonization. Can you just unpack that a bit for me and walk me through what that exactly means?
So basically, each state and territory has their own set of regulations that charities need to adhere by. And for there to be full harmonisation, FIA is advocating to all states and territories that they select, say, 25 of the top regulations that everyone in each state and territory adheres to. So basically what happens is, rather than there being state by state, each state has one set of regulations, and that may be, say, for example, 20, and then every state and territory has the exact same rules and regulations that apply to every state and territory. Now, that would be, in the perfect world, that would be amazing. And I would hope one day we can get there. But FIA is working with all state and territory governments to find ways for true harmonisation to occur. And by true harmonisation, I mean that there is one set of rules for every state and territory, and it sits like that. You know, it'll probably all be named differently. They all might be called something different, but they all have the same set of regulations within them. So no matter where you're based, where your charity is based, you follow the same rules in Western Australia that you do in Queensland. And that's what FIA is advocating state and territory governments to do. Now, in the instance, because it isn't looked after federal government, we still need to engage with the Federal Charities Minister, Zed Seselja, and he's been assisting FIA in getting some of these discussions happening. But the decision makers are based in the states and territories. So FIA is really engaging with states and territories to push forward these reforms so that we can effectively save between 15.3 and $15.8 million every year, which, you know, is a significant amount of money that would go back into the pockets of charities across the country.
And are those calculations, are they based on the resource requirements at the charity's end? Is that sort of the calculations that they've spun out, or is there some sort of fee that accompanies these sort of applications?
So it would be the time spent between it might be one full-time equivalent person spending their whole year just working on the regulations and compliance that need to be adhered to. So that's where that figure has come from.
Yeah, great. And so I guess when we talk about harmonisation as well, you mentioned this sort of red tape reduction agenda that we're hearing about. One of your other submissions as well, that the most recent one, I think, really had a red tape reduction action plan that we might actually pick up in a sec. But that what you guys are abbreviating to the RTRAP, the Red Tape Reduction Action Plan, that really is linking quite closely to this harmonisation goal, right? Okay, perfect.
Cool. So basically, FIA released the Red Tape Reduction Action Plan 12 months ago, circulated it to all state and territory governments, and you know the first point in our Red Tape Reduction Action Plan is to develop a basic license approach. Almost every state and territory has now introduced that license, which is a huge win for FIA, but also a huge win for our members as well. And you know, we're getting there slowly, which is great. I think, you know, personally, I think it's great, especially at the moment when there's pandemic and recession and everything else that is hitting the Australian economy at the moment. I think we are finally getting to the point after, 15 years or so of debate, we're finally getting some good results for the sector, which is good to see.
That is awesome, and great job on, the persistence of it all. It can take a long time, unfortunately. But and look, talking about COVID and all things pandemic, there were some other recommendations as well that you guys had put forward as part of this submission. And the one that I was quite interested by was the second one you've got here, which is really that the FIA recommends a digital grants fund be established to assist charities. Do you want to walk me through exactly what that's about and what's driven that?
So essentially, within the Australian economy, there's, I think, 600,000 plus non-for-profits within the country. And as many people would know, a lot of non-for-profits are strapped for cash. And they just don't have the ability to be able to invest in their digital capability. And the idea come up within a discussion between myself and Catherine, where we felt that if there was a digital grants program, which unfortunately there wasn't one outlined in the federal budget, it would assist charities and non-for-profits to be able to raise their game in terms of how much they're having that experience with their donors, but also the public as well. Because we all know that, at the moment, we're all in this digital landscape where we're zooming between borders and, haven't haven't probably seen a person in weeks if you're looking at the poor Victorians. And we looked at that and just thought that, you know, we are in a digital economy at the moment, and we will continue to be in this digital economy if there was a grant process for, you know, the small charity down the road with 5 staff members who would be able to upgrade their website. It actually might give them a bit more of a, it allows them to reach their market. It allows them to get out and be noticed and all that other kind of stuff. And we did a whole heap of research on what the percentage of charities who don't even have a website and just rely on community messaging and all that other kind of stuff. So if we can get all charities and, you know, non-for-profits to have a website, then you're actually going to start to get the acknowledgement and the awareness brought to your organisation as well. So in saying that, you know, FIA will obviously work with state and territory governments in anticipation that one of them may include it within their upcoming budgets, which are, which will be spread out over the next 5 months or so.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see, won't it, how charities continue to move into this digital era, and you know, particularly as, you know, the submission even that you had put forward references, a lot of charities rely on these face-to-face events, face-to-face methods of raising money, and I think my experience is that even, you know, smaller charities particularly will gravitate to events to raise money, and
Yep.
You know, to support them move into the digital time that we're in seems to make a bit of sense. It all come down to the execution, though, you know, won't it, in terms of each charity's ability to be able to put that money to effective use. But I think the point that we're getting to is it would be great if there was the opportunity to be able to do that.
And that's the thing too, Dan, is, you know, FIA is here to, you know, help the smallest of charities, but also assist the large charities as well. You know, I am, and Catherine is, your advocate to Parliament House in Canberra and to all of Parliament houses across the country as well. So if this doesn't work, then we will, you know, we'll go to the federal minister and have those discussions of maybe there might be a small fund of money for charities to be able to have some form of grant process. So just because we put it in our pre-budget submission doesn't mean we drop it. We'll continue that messaging down the path as well. Yeah,
brilliant. And one of the other recommendations here was around ACMA, which is the Australian Communication and Media Authority. This one seemed to make a lot of sense to me as well, but maybe you could unpack it for me a little bit. It seems especially important given the coming off the back of the bushfires and just the heightened generosity, I suppose, of the public to respond to natural disasters as we typically do here in Australia. But can you sort of talk to us a little bit about what that recommendation's about?
Yeah. So at the beginning, well, not even at the beginning of this year. Well, yeah, the beginning of this year during the bushfires, I should say October last year, when the bushfire season really kicked off, we saw a increased level of scams that were popping up, you know, through Scam Watch and a few other places as well, which obviously hit the sector quite badly in terms of putting it into a level of disrepute. And again, and you know, my predecessor Scott did a lot of work on this, and he did a great job on it. We felt that if there were special powers given to ACMA, that they should be able to shut down fake sites, but also take civil action against the perpetrator as well. Now, the shutdown powers are basically based on those that already exist within ACMA, to, you know, control and regulate illegal online gambling. So it's kind of just that extra added hit, if that makes sense, to giving ACMA just that little bit more power. And kind of what the overarching, piece is that if we can block those or shut down these scamming charities, that it's actually going to increase trust and transparency with the public as well. And this is my personal opinion, I feel that at the moment there is just that lack of trust with charities just this year, through the bushfires and things like that. And it's not a charity's fault for the poor messaging. I just think that the amount of scams that have come out of this year because of bushfires and also a pandemic has just been elevated to that next step. So it's added another, it's added a boundary or another wall to what charities already go through as it is. Because, we can all acknowledge that charities do some great work, but there's always, the level, if there's someone out there scamming, that's always going to cause, some kind of public mistrust within the rest of the population as well. So this idea of having these shutdown powers will actually create further trust and transparency for the sector, which is what FIA is all about. That's what we want to do. We want to create trust and transparency.
And we need that, don't we? I mean, that the sector really relies on that. It lives on trust and transparency, and any sort of attempt to undermine and sort of erode that really isn't sustainable for our sector, And I think you mentioned as well that how it does erode the trust. The thing with the scammers too is that they usually get quite good media attention, and so there's this, it ripples across society the disproportionately, I think, in terms of the scam versus all of the good that charities are doing and need to continue to do. But there is this scaling of mistrust based on, relatively small scams. Do you know what I mean? But any scam obviously needs to be dealt with. And I guess at this stage, then, Blake, is there no recourse? Is there no one there that can step in to say, this is a scam site, they're obviously fraudulent or bad actors, we need to take this down? Is there nothing there at this stage?
So at the moment there is. There's obviously the ACCC Scam Watch, which is run by the federal government. However, what they will do is they will just look at, the scam in itself. They will sometimes go after the scammers. But additionally, it comes down to, extra funding that is probably needed within some of these government agencies that would assist in, getting rid of some of these, illegal websites and all that kind of stuff as well. So, I think there are things in place already, and I would encourage anyone, whether they be members or, the Australian public, if they see a website that looks like a scam to them, then they can, get in touch with the scamwatch.gov.au. I feel like I'm giving them a little tab in. They can go to scamwatch.gov.au. They can make a complaint. The Scamwatch or ACCC will look into it and investigate, and basically we'll get a resolution out of it. If they can find who the person is, well, obviously there'll be some kind of ruling on that, or jail time or a fine or something along those lines. Usually that'll be the case.
Okay. And then the final couple of recommendations that you had put forward were really around incentives, both at the individual taxpayer level, but then for corporations as well. The first one around individuals and providing 150% tax deduction. Can you talk me through that? What that actually means? Is there a practical example you might be able to give me that sort of really explains what that all's about?
Yeah. So basically and a good recent example is actually out of Singapore. So the Singapore government has just, due to increased community engagement, they've produced a net benefit basically to government. So if you give, a certain amount of money, you're going to get more than what you would usually get back from that benefit as well. So the reasoning behind this is, we're wanting to provide just that one-off incentive to the, for philanthropy and social investment, because we know that it's unusual in some countries. But it's also giving charities a bit of a stimulus as well, because if you're giving, say, $500, and that there's 150%, providing a tax deduction on that $500, well, then more people are going to give, aren't they? So it's kind of a bit of a an idea to get the Australian people to donate more, but also to be able to be given an incentive once they give that money back, rather than what they would get now.
Yeah, so in that $500 example, you're basically able to then claim 1.5 times that gift amount, $750 as a deduction. Okay.
Yeah, essentially, absolutely.
Cool. Have these other countries seen that? Do you know whether they've seen that actually work as an incentive? Is that something that's evidence-based, or is it too early to tell at this stage?
So, look, I think it's too early to tell, but I know through my conversations with my counterpart in Singapore, they've had some great results out of it. But I think this is one that we definitely need to watch. It might be an area that may be better suited for when the Australian economy is out of a deficit. So, that might be one thing that we may park for the moment, but then, give back in, say, 15 years time.
Yeah.
Maybe we're not in we're not in a debt.
Look, it'll be interesting to see what Singapore does see, and whether see from it, and whether it's certain types of donors, that are motivated by that, whether they are over a certain gift amount or not, whether it's sort of just across the board. I'd be really interested to see whether that's an incentive for everyone, or a small subset, maybe those high net worth, just out of interest. It'd be interesting to see how that comes into effect. And then the other one that you guys had put up was really the incentive around corporate support, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. So just like on this point, obviously that there's huge costs of working remotely, for both fundraising approaches, service delivery, and it's hit charities fairly hard as well, who often have really low financial reserves and have been hit very hard. What we would like to see, or what we would have loved to see, I should say, is we would have liked that the Commonwealth government provided, in terms of a rebate scheme or a mechanism to kind of fund this kind of transformation required. And what we would like to see from the Commonwealth government is just greater tax incentives to companies who want to contribute to charities as well. There's lots of, internal giving events and all that kind of stuff as well. But I think with greater incentives based on corporate size and donation value, I think the Australian government can do a lot more in tax reform. But that's probably a bit more of a detailed conversation. It's probably best not for here.
Yeah. Well, look, just in terms of the budget, actually, now that we're talking, having it been released, what did you see in there, if anything, that was relevant to our sector, particularly in terms of, you obviously had a pre-budget submission here. There was a few things that we didn't see get up, but were there things that you were happy to see that would indirectly or directly touch our sector?
Look, I've kind of given this some thought, because I thought that you would ask me this question, so I'm glad we waited till later on this week to catch up. But and I think we still have Albanese's speech to come tonight, which is his budget reply, and I think it wasn't a bad budget in my opinion. You know, you had tax cuts for all Australians. Yes, you may not get your tax concession until next year, to the end of this financial year, which isn't helping anyone, let's be honest. You know, especially those who are struggling. But I think for our sector alone, you know, there's been Job Seeker, there's been Job Keeper, you know, there's now the Job Maker program, which, you know, charities can now hire someone between 16 and 35. Now, I could also jump on the other side and say, well, then you're discriminating against the 36-year-olds to the, you know, 80-somethings who possibly maybe still want to work or would have to work. You know, I think there's many pros and cons for the budget that's been released, but, you know, the federal government is in a really sticky situation. You know, they can't produce a budget that gives money to everyone. They really have to invest on what is going to create jobs. And, you know, as we see the unemployment rate rise, you know, quarter on quarter, you know, personally, I think the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have done a pretty good job. You know, yeah, there are things that could have been done better, you know, like more money for women and all those other kinds of things. And I've read the commentary and all those kind of things, but, you know, I think if I was to give the budget a grade between, you know, A to, you know, F, I'd probably give it a C plus, just to kind of, because I feel like it does give a lot. And job creation is such a key pillar at the moment. And, you know, you can't give everyone what they need in a federal budget. There are always going to be winners and losers. And I don't like to use that terminology, but unfortunately that's the terminology that's used. So, you know, there are areas where the sector can really, you know, to still get some benefit, I think, but social services was missed out on the budget quite a bit, which is sad to see, especially when charities do a lot of the heavy lifting. And, you know, we hire 1.5 million people, and then we also have volunteers, there's double that. So, you know, charities do make an impact. And I think it's a shame that, you know, for a sector that hires roughly more people than the mining sector, that we're always left out. You know, we're left out on, you know, reform, we're left out in a budget. And this isn't me having a whinge, this is just stating the facts. So I think for what the budget is and what the current climate that we're actually in, you know, it's actually not a bad budget. But in saying that, you know, there's economists out there who probably disagree with me and all that other stuff. But, you know, I think, you know, if I compare myself to other countries, I think we're doing a lot better than a lot of other countries. So we should be quite gracious of that. So,
yeah, it's always challenging, isn't it, to sort of get a budget is never going to please everyone all the time. You know, there seem to be some different approaches, particularly as you mentioned, to that younger employment priority. You know, I think getting people in jobs has always been one of those priorities, but to really focus their attention on the younger demographic was something new. And I wonder whether there will be some sort of indirect correlation then to our sector. You know, particularly if charities can ride out this tough time of COVID, if donors can continue to support and jobs do start to come back on board or online in our sector, whether that sort of thing is of use, you know, to bring in younger people into the market and get them back working again.
Yeah.
Look.
I think, you know, the government has had to do a lot of things that a Liberal government would normally not do. You know, they had to open up superannuation funds so people could afford to pay their bills and their rent and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, there's arguments for and against if, you know, you took your super or not. But I think, there were a lot of younger Australians, but also older Australians out there as well, who they had to dip into their super. So, they are now the people who are going to be worse off longer term, but need jobs now so they can start topping up their super. And, someone who's in their, say, 55s has had a fairly long career until now, but they may have another 20 years of work in them. And if they've dipped into their super, well, they might have taken, 20 grand out. What impact is that going to have on their superannuation funds? And I think, as we start to progress, through the years, we're actually going to see what the pandemic impact is to our communities, and charities are really going to have to do the heavy carrying to, help a lot of these people. So I think that's why, government really needs to start engaging with, FIA and, Philanthropy Australia and Volunteers Australia to make sure that we've got adequate resources and things like that to help us, deliver these programs to the public.
Yeah, and on that note, we had touched on this red tape reduction action plan, and so it seems now more than ever, if we can save money doing save money on duplication or ineffective or inefficiencies, and actually point that money, particularly in the years ahead where they are potentially more challenging times than usual, it's going to be important. And so what's that action plan about? What comprises it? You mentioned that there was a national framework as part of that. And really this is coming back to our first point, isn't it, around this harmonization. How is it that we can remove this duplication of effort and resources? Are there other key things, though, Blake, that you think is important that I should be knowing about within that?
Look, at the end of the day, I think, as long as you're, keeping yourself aware of what the regulations are in each state and territory, which I know you are, also following the guidance of, the FIA code and making sure that you're, that you're practicing best practice fundraising is another great way to make sure that you're actually following the regulations, because it's all within that suite of documents that we've produced. I think over time, more governments, more state and territory governments will make more reform changes. And, the FIA will always filter those messages out to government. But I think, for now, it's kind of a sit and wait and watch, because, there are discussions going on in the background, through the National Working Group and, between FIA and Philanthropy Australia and all the other industry bodies to really push forward this reform agenda. And, each state and territory premier knows that there needs to be reform, but because you've got so many other conflicting sectors, one needing reform at the same time, it's, well, who's burning the bigger torch? Who do we deal with first? So, I think we'll get there. But we just need to be pragmatic, but also efficient in our timing of what we are advocating for, because we need results, and we need them, we need them urgently, but I think we need to be strategic in how we, sell our message to government. We need to be proactive in a way that doesn't, scare them away, if that makes sense. You can't be, howling at them and all that kind of stuff. You've got to go with solutions and answers. So, and it's a different kind of parliament too, so it's hard, and each state is a different parliament as well. So, Queensland's in an election, ACT's in an election. It's a very dynamic year in terms of public policy and government. So it's really tough.
And I think that probably was going to be my next question too, is what happens now that there has been a submission? What are the steps that you can expect usually? Is there some sort of continued engagement? Does it depend on what the submission is? Are you treated, are all people that sort of make a submission treated individually, or is it just bulk communication then from government? What's it actually look like?
So usually what would happen is once you submit a submission, you would then meet with the respective minister of your portfolio, have a discussion about your submission, meet with the advisors, meet with department officials and have a discussion and, use a story to build your case of why this piece of legislation or why this recommendation should be followed through by the government. It's very based on that stakeholder engagement, making sure that you are delivering a key message, but also showing the benefits to that message as well to Parliament. Plus the other thing is now more than ever, data is key in any advocacy strategy. If you've got strong data, you can have reforms very, very quickly. And from, just from previous experience, and, I've done advocacy and other industry bodies as well, is the easiest way to achieve reform is through strong data from your sector. And that's essentially what I'm trying to do at FIA, is to build our data capacity so that then I can actually filter that data to Treasury and the Prime Minister and Cabinet in Canberra and all the other Premier and Cabinets and Treasuries across the country as well, to give them that evidence as to why reform is urgently needed. Because if you've got good data that sells a true message, especially at the moment in a digital economy, which kind of ties us back to digital grants recommendation, is, you can do anything. Data sells, basically. Yeah.
What do you think, the fundraiser like me role is in all of this? What's the role of the member organisations of FIA, the individual members of FIA, even the non-members? What do you think our role is as professionals in this sector to support the work that you're sort of undertaking?
So the good thing is if I'm to come to your state and territory, and I'll use you as an example, Dan, because I know you're in Queensland, I would come to Queensland and I would say, Dan, I want to take you to the Attorney General in Queensland, and I'd like to get you to share some of your stories of what the impacts are to, regulatory compliance within Queensland. I would take you to that meeting. I'd get you to share your story of how hard the compliance is. And then I would say to the minister, and here is all the data from the rest of our members from Queensland. This is all the steps that they need to go through to comply with all the various pieces of regulation and legislation and everything like that. And that is the best way to advocate usually. But obviously during a pandemic, it makes it that bit harder. So I've had to come up with creative ideas like campaigns and mail outs and, sending the code authority report to every MP across the country and, just creating that debate for the sector is really the initial step. If we can get the public talking about charities needing reform, to use the money for further programs, then you're kind of getting that public discussion happening, which in turn will then hopefully get the reforms that we need. And it'll also increase education for the sector as well, which is at the moment limiting.
Well, look, I wish you all the very best with it. I've really enjoyed our chat. I came into this, as I said, with not enough of an understanding that I was comfortable with, and really feel like you've helped close some of the gap between where I was and where I want to be with issues like this. So, look, sounds like Blake, you're doing a great job, and so is the rest of the FIA team, to really sort of move the needle on some of these really important issues at a time where a lot of charities are doing it difficult. And certainly the end game here, and I think what we all want, is more money where it can make a difference. And if we can achieve that through some reform, through some of this harmonization, I think that absolutely is a great cause worth fighting for. So thanks for being brave enough for letting me hit record on this. If it sees the light of day, you know, thank you for having that chat with me, and you know, really congratulate you and wish you all the best going forward.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for having me, Dan. That's great.
See you, mate.
Okay, thanks, buddy. Bye.